Welcome to the Joy Quota podcast. I'm Dylan Fole.
And I'm Gavin Malcolm.
Our guest today is Bobbianne Stambaugh, an amazing artist, talented flower welder, really cool stories.
And she has a huge mission to make the world a much better place, and we cannot wait for you to catch some of that vision. So enjoy.
I was the college professor, and that's what I wanted to be, and like why I got all the degrees I have. And I'm like, okay, just a sign. Like this is like the second school that I worked for that shut down.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think.
What were you teaching?
I was teaching like intro, like graphic design classes. So like intro Photoshop, intro to digital.
Okay.
So it was like I taught them everything. It was like, you're going to do Photoshop, website, a little bit of coding, and like Unity too. So a little bit of gaming.
Yeah, I saw that. I did take a quick peek at the website. I saw that you do some like VR programming, which has to be so crazy that I can't even imagine what goes into that.
It's pretty nuts. Like, you have to do all the regular coding, but you have to think also in like a 3D way.
Yeah, in a three-dimensional space.
Exactly. So it's not just, in a lot of ways, when you're doing like a regular video game, right? You just have like, it's like film. You just have that
one vantage point,
that one screen, that one viewpoint for the viewer, and that's it, But with 3D, they can go anywhere, they can look anywhere.
Yeah.
So like you can have like gravity and control things so they're not flying everywhere, but at the same time you need to be able to like predict where are they going to go. So if you make a game area, are they going to go into this room? How do I get them into this room? How do I get them to go around? How do they get the story across?
Yeah.
So you have to really think things out a lot, and then fight with like, how do you direct the viewer to where you're looking to?
Yeah, so they don't just wander off.
Right.
Because it's so much harder to
Right.
not, or to get like distracted, just like,
I'm just gonna go over here, and how do I do that? So that was the hardest part, I think, in a way, because it was like, so if I want them to go in this room, what's gonna entice someone? So I need the door to like creak open on its own and interest somebody out of because I would make like I called it PTSD game. So it's like you go through this world, but it's like a big garage like here, but like when you have PTSD, you don't know when you're going to get a flashback or something's going to trigger you. So you're just walking along, and then weird stuff starts happening.
Okay.
So it's like I have to get them to see the weird things.
Yeah, you have to get them to reach the event in order to trigger the programmed response or like movie clip that goes in, and like, this is what you're remembering all of a sudden.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So that's, I was recreating that experience so the viewer could have it. So that took forever, because it would be like, okay, how do I get them to go into this room? Okay, now I've got them into this room, and now they can there's things flying at them out of nowhere, but you have to get them into a certain spot. And then it's like you're thinking about, too, right, if it's a 3D object, they actually has to be 3D, versus most of the time when you're doing a game or something like that, you don't have to worry about the back, right?
Yeah, it's like, just a two-dimensional drawing of a 3D object versus actually making it something they can like pick up and look at and manipulate.
Right, exactly.
So is this to help PTSD patients? Or
it's kind of more to give the public an understanding of what PTSD is and how it works, because there's a lot of misnomers about it, that like you will magically just get over PTSD, and that doesn't happen. Once you have it, you have it. What happens is you have cycles, and your cycles get better or worse. Most people, once they get treatment and so forth, they go better for a while, but something could trigger them again, and it'll happen all over again. So it's just it's a life pattern of cycles. And so you're not like spiraling out of control, but it's always there and it's something you have to be aware of.
Yeah, it's like if I'm picturing, at least just trying to like come to an understanding of, I'm picturing like someone with like high cholesterol, like it's there. You're right. And like maybe one day that one French fry sets off like something and all of a sudden you're dealing with the consequences of that, and then you go back, because my dad has high cholesterol, and like sometimes we go out and he'll just smash like a whole pizza to himself, no problem. Because we're definitely the same person. And then other days, like a cracker, and too many of just like 5-6 crackers and cheese, and he's like, oh wow, I'm done for the day.
Right. Yeah. And that's the weird thing about it. It's like you can try and plan, right? Because I have PTSD, like I know what my triggers are and I can plan, but there's stuff that I can't plan. Yeah. Like you can plan your whole life and be like, okay, I know how to handle this and I know how to handle that. But if like one time there was a kid that just decided to wear this horrible costume and scare me. And like, how can you plan for that? And he jumped out of nowhere and he thought it was completely innocent, and it was. But he didn't know my life experience, and I'm like, oh, and it takes you back there. Because that's how your brain works. Like, once you have the neural pathways set up in your brain, if something triggers you, what it's really doing is setting that energy across, and it's triggering that memory. So, like, you can help your brain and retrain it to avoid that and rebuild around it. But something can slip through and go across that bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, that's the thing. That's why I wanted to make something for people to see what it's like. And it's not, like, there's so many misnomers. Like, I was watching on Vice News, and they were talking about, like, treatment for PTSD. And they were talking about one of the reporters on there that he has PTSD from all of the, dangerous war reporting that he's doing. So he was, like, doing some sort of, I can't remember if it was, like, LSD or acid to try and break the cycle, because he kept getting triggered, and it would go along that path to change it. And but it wasn't a cure. And that's what people don't seem to understand. Yeah. It's like, okay, that just helped him get out of that cycle. It's like being on a record, right? And it's spinning and spinning in the same spot. Well, it just jumped it to a different spot.
Yeah, got into a new groove.
New groove, but that doesn't mean that old groove isn't still there.
Yeah.
And then it just takes someone to bump it back, and there you go again. So,
almost like a infrastructure, like a highway. Like, that road isn't ever going to go away. You can build the new highway that everyone uses, and it's better in every way, but every now and again someone will take that original road.
Right. And it's awful. It's an awful road filled with snow and dirt, and nobody wants to be on it. Yes, you don't want to be there. But so like, that's why I think it's so important to talk about these things. Because there is so much misinformation about it, and there's so many people that have.
Well, it's one of those things I don't think you would really think of unless you experience, like, not even in like a malicious way. Like, I don't think about what it's like to have diabetes because I don't have diabetes. Right. Like, I don't know what it's like to really have to watch all sorts of things like that. So I feel like that's just kind of people in general. But is the game available? Is that something that people can actually get to yet? Or?
I did have it available. But it's an old version. It was it's probably been like 3 years. So I did have it up.
It's like the front end of VR then, like right on that.
Yeah. So the headset that I used was the first one that came out from Oculus.
Wow.
So that was the very first one. So I did it right then, and then they changed right after that. And it was so funny. I would take it to get critiqued because it's grad school and you go and get critiqued, and people will be like, well, where are the hand controls? And I'm like, they haven't invented it yet. You just have
Give me a break.
Like, they're like, you should fix that. And I'm like, do you know what you're actually saying? Like, I should invent a whole new technology just so you can play my game.
A whole new video game system.
So just give me like $50 million and cool. I'll see you in a year.
I'll compete with Nintendo and Microsoft and Sony.
Yes, and Facebook, and it'll be great. So yeah, they hadn't even invented any of that yet.
Wow.
So yeah, so you'd have to put on the headset, and then you'd have to use like the mouse, or like the ASWD. Those like.
Oh wow! So this is PC even. Wow.
Yeah, so you could use the mouse or those at the same time. I had one professor, he tried to do it. He just kept laughing because he just kept running into a wall over and over because all he would do is walk forward into the wall with the mouse, go, forward and back, forward and back. And I'm like, let me just help you.
Why not take over the controls? You enjoy the ride.
Yeah, exactly. You enjoy the ride, and let me just help you.
Take you on a movie.
Yeah, because a lot of, like, they don't even, like, I went to Lesley, and they're fairly traditional program in a way. Like, you get an MFA, you don't have to declare like sculpture or photography. You can do whatever you want, and that's why I went there. So they're progressive in that way, but they don't have a lot of people that do a lot of high-end tech. But yeah,
I mean, it's certainly. I don't think that I would be any good at VR. Like, I can barely play Mario Kart, so I'm sure that like someone who wasn't already involved in like anything remotely close to VR, especially on the front end of VR. The professors had no chance.
Yeah, there was no chance that, they've been reading like history books and they're all knowledgeable about that. But yeah, so pulling that in. But I don't know, that's what I like about VR is that once the technology gets to the place where it's meant to be, it can open the door for so many people. Because that's always bothered me about video games anyway, is that the entry point to play, you have to have been playing since you were a little kid. And if you haven't been, then you're not. Like, if you weren't rich, like I wasn't rich, I didn't have like all the consoles, so my husband kicks my ass at anything, right? Like, he's at home playing, NBA, and it would take me forever to get good enough to beat him at that because I don't have the years of experience. And I'm like, why should that be there? That's a cop-out by the industry to not figure out a way to get let everybody play.
It is funny. I never even considered it, honestly, because our thing is more like physical activity, like bike riding and snowboarding and stuff like that, which we have been doing since we were kids, and so we are good at it. And then people try and come in as adults, and they're just not, but it's so natural for us, it's hard to explain how to do it.
Right.
And then, but we don't play video games at all, and so we would be horrible at it, but it's just one of those things we don't even... I never even considered that, I'm horrible at it because I haven't put in the time the same as...
right off the bat as a kid, I remember specifically, like, anytime the kids in my class were like, hey, we're going to go have, like, a Halo night at so-and-so's house, I was like, I'm only in if it involves airsoft and shenanigans outside first. Like, until dark, we better be doing my stuff, or else I'm not going. Because I couldn't keep up. Well, I think it's just kind of human nature. It's so hard to, and I think that's a big part of VR, and like kind of what you were talking about with hopefully getting people to kind of experience PTSD, so that just for the sake of like getting to see someone else's world for a little bit.
Yeah,
I have the hardest time explaining to people a physical activity. Like, if I try and teach someone I tried to teach my wife how to bunny hop my BMX bike. And right off the bat, I'm just like, you do a bunny hop. And she's like, well, that means nothing to me. I can barely pedal this thing. Why is the seat so low? And it took hours before she was getting off the ground. And it was literally just because I was a terrible teacher. Like, something that's so second nature to someone is always really hard to get someone else to really experience or to understand.
It's fairly impressive, though, if you taught her, if she was doing it in a couple hours versus you've been doing it.
It went well right up until she tried to bunny hop up a curb and then just straight over the bars to her face.
I don't remember.
Yeah, if you should ask her about it when we get home. It's a good one. She was a trooper, though. She tried it once more afterwards.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, but that's the thing. I think that's why there's like so few women in the industry. Like, eventually, that's what I would love to do. Like, I have my sculpture work, but one day I would love to be able just to make make video games too. So that's kind of my 10-year plan is to have this sculptural part, learning how to make a business and talking about like trauma and stopping trauma, but eventually working out into different art projects in different fields because I can't seem to stay in one lane.
That's awesome.
That's fair.
Ever. Yeah.
I think we would say the same about ourselves. So.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good, I guess, spot to kind of shoehorn this in is we haven't actually really met before, especially not you and I. You and Dylan somewhat know each other.
So
just so everyone gets to know you, we'd like
are in a business development course together with the Denver SBDC, Small Business Development Group, and the Chamber of Commerce. And she is the only one that has a baby, which was very interesting.
A fresh one.
Literally
right out the oven.
So this was week 8 of the course, and we just asked, and her baby is 9 weeks old.
Yes.
Yeah.
So 1 week after having a baby, she started this business development course, which is dedication like I've never heard or seen of anything, honestly. So that's why she's here.
Yep.
It's pretty awesome, and we're excited to talk to her about all kinds of art and
she's got some really cool projects going on, and really has a big mission when it comes to what she's hoping for contributing to the world. And so, as a good little jumping off point, tell us about yourself, because we're all learning this together, us and the viewers.
Bobbianne Stambaugh. I grew up in Pueblo, and then I went to college forever, and I have 3 degrees. One in sculpture, and I have an emphasis in photography too, and then a master's in adult education and training, and then an MFA in fine art.
What does an MFA stand for someone who
Master
did
of Fine Art. So that's kind of like your terminal degree in the arts. So there is no such thing as a doctorate. There's a couple of programs, but the College Arts Association sees that as your terminal degree, and boy, did it feel like it. So,
awesome.
Yeah. So I've been working in the arts. Gosh, well, my mother owned an art gallery and art supply store like Meininger's. It was designed exactly like Meininger's here. She actually worked with Henry's father. So Meininger's is a big art store here. Yeah, and they have like 3 now. But yeah, so she worked with the grandfather of the guy that owns it now.
Sweet.
So so I worked there for a while. It was pretty crazy because that's kind of like if you go there, that's where I grew up. It's in that art store / gallery.
I feel like that's such a big part of who we become is so much of our environment. Like I grew up in the outdoors. Like my dad is definitely, both my parents were older when they had me, so they were definitely more of the generation of like, until dark, I shouldn't see you around the house. Like you should be gone, I shouldn't know where you are, and then you should come home dirty and all
wanting food.
Yeah, exactly. Like
there'll be food.
Yeah, you're supposed to be gone digging holes in someplace and come back.
Right.
And that's so the hipster term for that is latchkey kid.
What? Latchkey is when your parents aren't around. They were there. They just didn't want me inside.
Right. They just didn't want you raised by TV.
Yeah, like it was literally like it's nice, and like my dad would get us like a go-kart, or we always had dogs at both my houses, or like I would have a ramp in the front yard that I'd go jump my bike off of. Yeah. And lo and behold, you spend your entire childhood inside of an art supply store.
Right.
And now you have like every degree in art possible. Work in all these different forms of art.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like I grew up with an art studio in my basement. So, if I get bored, I'd go play with clay or paint something or do something like that. So that's normal for me. So it'll be normal for my son because it'll be like, I'll be out welding. We're like, we're going to go weld. So
what kind of welding?
I have, MIG. Yep.
Nice.
So it's a dual process, so it's MIG and FlexCore. So
Sweet.
you can either do just regular wire with the gas, the acetylene, or you can do the FlexCore, which has it already on there. So
yeah. You're talking to a welder, so I'm all about it.
Yeah.
But before we geek out on that, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So anyway, like I said, like 2 years ago, after I had worked at Lincoln College and watched like the online school fail and so many schools fail that I've worked at. I was like, maybe it's time to like stop being an art professor and just do my art, which is what I've always wanted to do anyway. Like I really love teaching, but like I really, really love being in the studio, and that's my happy place. That's where my joy is. So I was like, well, all right, I'm just going to start working towards that. And I started trying to figure out a way to make artwork that was actually sellable, right? Because
it's got to be marketable.
Got to be marketable. I had to be a rebel in grad school, and I was doing the VR thing, but I was also doing installation art. So that's where you make a whole room into an art piece, and you go and have an experience. And I was making all these crazy psychedelic things that would, very trippy, PTSD-like.
Meow Wolf.
Yes,
style.
very Meow Wolf.
I've just heard about Meow Wolf.
Yes, and they're coming here. Yeah,
I'm like
super
blown
excited
away about it.
I know, but it's super hard. So that's like the only install space in Denver that's left besides like the Denver Art Museum.
Yeah.
Like there's not a lot of places where you can really show that work, let alone sell that work. It's really hard to get into the industry that way. So
that's surprising, though, with how many just standard galleries there are. I mean, there's hundreds.
Yeah,
a standard gallery you can put on a wall, and you can still have room for the craft brewery in the middle versus an installation piece.
Right, and you can't sell it to somebody. Right? Like you have the whole room. Where is the person going to put that piece of artwork? They're going to have a whole room that they can dedicate, or they're going to collect it.
Right. I think it's more of like an admission style ticket thing.
Yeah,
it's the key for that one.
But the thing is most galleries they're not built on that kind of model.
Yeah, it's consignment.
It's all on consignment, and that's how they're used to doing things. So there's not a lot. And then with the industry, it's really shrunk a lot, even since I've only lived in Denver for like 10 years, but like Plus Gallery used to be a huge gallery here, gone. And like most of the galleries in Rhino are gone.
Do you think a big part of that is the internet in general, and like just how kind of the world and society has moved to everything should be free? Like as weird as it sounds, like I refuse to pay for my YouTube, as silly as it sounds, even though I watch constant YouTube and I hate the ads, and the whole time I just won't pay for it. As silly as that is, versus I got Spotify, and right off the bat.
Different.
I mean, is YouTube not art?
Right.
Different argument.
Physical art. But like, I think that's
same
part
with like
of it.
Newspapers, and like there's a lot of things that I think just in general we've all gotten used to not paying for. And it's something I've become more committed to now. Probably over the last year or so, is if I really enjoy a service, finding a good reason to pay for it. Like happily choosing to pay for it.
Right.
For that, like now that I've gotten really hooked on this one specific YouTube channel, part of me is like, I want to pay so that it actually pushes the ball forward in that.
Right.
Versus, or like same with Spotify, like I know they don't pay the artists that well, but before it was LimeWire.
Right.
And so as soon as I had access to it, I was so happy to pay for it.
Right.
Like I feel like maybe that might have part of the deal with art is Instagram and everything that's free. Maybe
I want to come back to the art, but just going to what you're saying, the issue is for me, Spotify made it easier because LimeWire was a pain in the ass. It sucked.
It broke every computer I had.
And then, so if you can pay $10 a month to listen to whatever song you want ever, that is a great price point, and it's easy, and that's awesome. YouTube's problem is it's been free for the last 10 years, and now they want us to pay for it. and they bombard us with ads, and it sucks. Like,
you
can't. It's like the bait and switch type thing. We've gotten used to it being free for so long,
right.
But I think
and it was easy before.
Yeah,
and I fully understand wanting to support artists.
We have a YouTube channel that we're trying to get paid off of.
Yes.
So
right, and I think part of that is like inherent, like even in the art world, part of the problem is that you had like your blue chip galleries. So those are like your New York galleries and so forth, and they were making a bunch of money. But these smaller galleries, I feel like the part of the problem is that they didn't really embrace the 21st century and change their business model. So they weren't advertising the way that they needed to. Like they don't use social media. I haven't heard like really of a gallery that uses that well.
I couldn't name a single one in Denver besides the Contemporary Art Museum and the actual Denver art.
Those aren't galleries. So
those aren't. Yeah, those are.
That's what I'm saying. Like
exactly.
But I live in the Rhino quote unquote art district.
This is the art district, and there isn't. Like Ironton used to be right up the street from you guys. They just closed, and that was like a huge gallery. Like that was a very premier gallery, and they used to do a bunch of sculpture stuff, and a lot of my professors showed there. So that was like they're gone.
They do still have studios.
They do have studios.
It is a distillery now, but they do.
I knew it turned into some kind of craft.
Yeah, but they weren't making enough money off of that, and that's because they weren't advertising it right. Like that's part of the. So for an artist, and that's the other thing is the way that. If you get into a gallery, you become part of their stable. Okay, you are a horse within their stable, and that's pretty much how you're treated. And the standard rate is that they get 40 to 50% of the profits of
that is much more than I would have assumed.
Yeah, which is a lot of bull because you're the one that puts up all the money. I had one artist friend, and she put in $10,000, and she was trying to do like an installation piece. She had one installation piece and then like 4 or 5 pieces that hung up on the wall to sell. $10,000. Sold nothing. So she's out the $10,000.
Yeah.
And once you're in that stable, you can't show anywhere else in the city of Denver. Sometimes they'll make you not show anywhere else in the state. So you have to go all the way to New Mexico, Texas to show.
So even if you're not in their gallery currently, you can't go anywhere else?
Oh, as long as you're under contract with them. Wow. So you may get one show a year, right? Because if they have 40 artists and they're having a group show, right, maybe 4, and you get a month.
Whoa.
Okay. Yeah, so that business model doesn't work anymore. And that's why a lot of artists are changing what they're doing and going to online and taking over the advertising. Because that's the thing. It's like, okay, yeah, you can have the 40%, but you're going to have your own like Rolodex of people that you sell to that you know will collect this kind of art, because that's where artists make money is people collect it. And then that's where the money comes from, because they could potentially sell it later, right? Like after you die or whatever. Yeah, so that's the whole thing. That's why Banksy made that piece that he did, because it is just such bullshit about how they treat artists. And he was making fun of the whole establishment by ruining his artwork right there in the middle of Christie's.
That was so cool.
Yeah, like that's...
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so...
I'm
awesome.
very uncultured.
Explain it. I mean, even discover. Do you know who Banksy is?
I do know who Banksy is, but that is strictly because.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways.
So, like, he's a graffiti artist, so he's kind of against the whole art industry anyway, like this blue chip gallery that excludes a lot of good artists,
grassroots for sure,
right? But it excludes a lot of people. So unless you live in New York, then you're not seeing this artwork, right? Like that's.
But then he paints on these walls, and then they chop down the walls and then sell them for millions of dollars.
Right.
Whoa!
It's insane.
Yeah, what? And nobody knows who he is. Nobody.
He's still one of the only like real anonymous
artists.
That is something I can get behind.
Yeah.
Totally completely different tangent I won't chase, but
so he took this piece. It was because he kind of has like a stencil graffiti aesthetic. So it's this girl in a black dress holding a balloon.
That's Banksy. I know that one.
Yes, and then how he shredded it. Like he had it on some sort of timer or something, and people were
at an auction.
At an auction, at a Christie's auction.
Like $2 million for this thing, and as soon as the gavel banged, like sold to this person, it automatically shreds. Just goes in the
yes.
so sick.
Yeah,
and then their faces of these people that are like so stuck up about all this artwork, they're like freaking out.
Yeah, like all they cared about was that they could claim they had a Banksy instead of like, this makes me feel something.
Right, and that's what it is. It's because a lot of times they'll just throw it into the corner.
You guys are so fired up.
They'll just throw it into the corner. And so a lot of installation artists, what they'll do is like have a digital version of their installation or something. So there is like this physical component that they can just put in the corner and be like, okay, you slap it on and boom, there's the art piece. So you can collect it.
Yeah.
So that people can get their money back out of it. Because that's the whole thing. Like, it's kind of like the price of gold, but it's one of those things that it's, in a way, it's stable, right? Like,
yeah, as long as that artist becomes popular, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, exactly, right. Like a Van Gogh is always going to be worth millions, no matter what. Yeah. So that's another place to kind of put their money.
Do you think VR will take it there? Because hearing the idea of like the installation pieces that become so expensive and there isn't a place to store it, I'm almost picturing a way, if there is a way, where you can create like, I mean, I'm sure it would take an unbelievable amount of effort to make something so realistic and so beautiful, but at the same time, I've played like Uncharted and some of these games where like their shoelaces bounce. It's amazing what they've been able to do. Oh, yeah. I wonder if that's where installation art might be, or a piece of installation art might be headed, is a place where it's maybe a lower fee to go experience it.
Right.
But it's available to the world without having to live in this specific neighborhood of this specific town, and kind of, for lack of better terms, turn it into Spotify, where it's a very low premium to get to it, but it's incredibly accessible.
Right. And that's eventually like where I would love to lead to, is to be able to make something like that, making like a VR video game, but having something that's, well, I'm going to say it. I don't like Halo because I feel like it's just like a grown-up version of chess. Cause like, right? Like you get a bigger sword, but it's heavier, so then your defenses go down. Like, come on. That's
guys,
chess.
we all know Halo.
It's just chess. And it's fine if you like chess. There's nothing wrong with chess. But can we have some other things too?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people would love to be involved in a story. Like, wouldn't it be great if you were in a story, literally in it, and being able to have an interaction and an experience there. So that's eventually what I'd love to do is do that. But that takes a lot. It takes a lot of capital, and it takes a lot of people, because one-man band doing that, oh my God.
Yeah, one person to be skilled enough at every aspect of making something like that is impossible.
Right.
One person couldn't.
It took me a year to make like the 6 games that I did make for grad school.
It's still pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I had like 6. I had one where you went under the sea. There was like a nebula that you went in outer space. So yeah, I had quite a few by the end of it. But yeah, that's eventually, like, I would love to have that too. But that's what I'm working towards. So I've got to figure out how to be a CEO and run a business, and then be able to have a bunch of people underneath me when we're all designing one thing.
Well, and you still need the technology of VR to become adopted. Like,
it's still not quite there.
I've never even done it. I don't.
Same.
I haven't. I don't know, because it's like one of those things. Like, there's no games, so I'm not gonna buy it, and I don't.
Well, I'm not even interested in the games. But I'd be interested in the story, though.
Right. I think that's
I'd be interested in like a movie you could watch as your own character, where like you like a choose your own adventure in, because that's what got me back into video games. I literally probably hadn't played any since I was like 14. As soon as I had my own BMX bike, I don't think I touched anything other than a Guitar Hero controller.
Right.
Till I was like 25.
Right.
And our roommate started playing Uncharted. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is awesome. He's playing Indiana Jones essentially. And like the game changes if he changes his actions. And it became like this live thing. I didn't even play the game. I just watched him play.
Oh, yeah.
And it was super fun. It was like a 14-hour movie.
Right.
And that would be more than worthwhile for VR, where I can picture being like your own experience.
Yeah,
where like Dylan and I could each, and it's not there yet, but I do think it will get there, where Dylan and I could each play the game and have totally separate experiences. I think that's cool.
Yeah, but then that's the thing about VR that you were talking about, where not only do you have to make a full 360 thing, you have to, like he says, make our experience is different. Like, as a designer, that seems insane.
Yeah, it's not like I'm frustrated that it's not here yet. I want it
but
to
it just means that's the kind of team that you need, right? Yeah. Like, to just imagine storyboarding that out, and before you even start coding and all of the back end stuff. Yeah. So that's like a 10-year dream. But they're trying though. Like Facebook bought Oculus for a reason, because Facebook wants you to experience Facebook in VR. Like,
which is
weird.
Crazy.
It's true.
That's the last thing I want to experience.
I'm very curious how that will work. Like,
but I do think we'll get
VR
there.
memes and
yeah, like Angry Cat, but just in person.
Well, but it's like, right, you are supposed to be having the shared experience in Facebook when you're on it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you're if you're actually doing VR in it and having that kind of experience?
Yeah, like you can go see concerts now in VR and like basketball games and stuff, where they'll set up like a very special camera that sees multiple different angles, and it streams it live, and it's like you're sitting at courtside or the next game.
Sports games, if you can like control where you are in it, that's next level. I can get on board with that. Like,
even then, I
don't know.
I am such a present person. I have such a hard time wanting to be present elsewhere than where I'm currently present.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Like, that's the entire point of like we watch football every Sunday. Like,
every a stretch, but even then,
pretty much. I mean,
but I'm more excited about the fact that we're watching football together than what's on the screen.
It's not accurate. You watch it on YouTube and like show me like how excited you are about this.
Oh yeah, if I watch like a best of or something like that. But even then, it's more about like, oh, I didn't know this was possible. Like, I see someone do like a front flip over a defender into the end zone. I'm like, wow, guess who's gonna learn stand-up front flips this week? Like, I get more like inspired by it. But I don't know. I feel like
I don't think it would take anything away from the. I mean, we're getting off topic.
Yeah,
but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's eventually.
Wondering about contemplating things. But I would like to come back. You were talking about how you're learning to be a CEO of your own business.
Right.
And obviously, this is your long distance plan.
Right.
I'd like to hear about Bobbianne Stambaugh, because you're doing some really cool stuff.
Yes.
And I'm a huge fan of what I checked out on the website, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So I also make sculptures as well. So I was like, well, how can I monetize this? So I came up, it was my sister's boyfriend from the past. He made these copper metal flowers and they're really beautiful. And he's since passed away, and I was looking at them and I'm like, those are pretty amazing. And I did some really cool sculptures in college where I made these huge fountains that would go outside out of metal, but they were inspired by nature around in Denver. So so there'd be like huge leaves of grass, and then you'd have like these water spigots coming out of them. And I was like, I've always thought people would love to have something like that, like in their yard or in their house. So I was like, that might just actually work, and why not try it? So yeah, here I am. So I make, right now I'm making copper and flowers, and I patina them using heat. So I actually heat the copper up, and then I drop water on it to make this droplet
You don't
effects.
actually use an actual patina?
No, because copper has these chemical reactions. Once it's heated up, it changes color.
Yeah.
So if you get it like really, really, really hot, it'll turn purple. I always explain it to people like a bruise. If you have a bruise and it's a really bad bruise, it's purple. But as it heals, it changes all these different colors, right? Of purples and reds, and that's what copper does, the exact same
Copper's
thing.
a weird metal.
It is weird.
Did you bring one by any chance?
No.
But there will be a link to the website, because
Yes.
I saw it and immediately I'm fascinated. I saw your website and I was immediately fascinated because I love people that can make things that are dead in the sense that, like, it's metal. It's not literally alive. Make something like that look alive. Like,
Right.
a wooden table looks alive because it was at some point alive, and you can watch the grain and all that stuff. But I'm always really impressed whenever someone can make something that isn't or never was alive seems so vibrant and like it actually had life, or it does have life.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan. I love stuff
and
like
that's
that.
why I love like working with metal, because like that's part of the reason like why I came up with the business too was I wanted to donate because I'm a trauma survivor, so I want to end trauma, and so I'm donating part of the proceeds. Right now it's like 5%. Hopefully one day it'll be like 10%.
Yeah.
But I'm donating part of the proceeds from all of the sales to organizations that help trauma survivors. So sexual assault and PTSD are the main ones that I donate to. So that's why I like working with the metal, right? Because so many times in our world, people, I don't know, being a survivor, people make you feel like it's you that did something wrong. Like if you're a trauma survivor, it's something negative about you, and it's like you're the one that's scarred, but really it's not. It's the person that did that to you.
Yeah, happy people don't hurt people.
Yeah, exactly. But the whole thing is with this metal that I'm using, and most of it is recycled. I find it in different places and go to different places and pick it up. I take this old metal that's been trashed and left behind, and I don't try to make it into something new. I let those scars, those things be there, because that's what adds beauty to it. That's what adds all the wrinkles to a flower. That's what makes the flower interesting. It's not the way that it's the same as everything else. It's the way that it's different. And that's really what adds beauty to it. So I love that message in that, like, this is where your beauty comes from. It's not that this happened to you. It's that you persevered and made it through. And here's this beautiful thing at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah, and just so people know, where can they go check out your artwork and all these amazing sculptures?
It's called Bobbianneflowers.com.
Yes. And there'll be a link.
Yep. So Bobbianne with an S, flowerswithan.com. So,
yeah, they're amazing. Yeah. I love anything that makes a static material seem lively and full of vibrance, and I'm always blown away. I'm really blown away because, I can structurally weld two pieces of steel together, but I see someone who really did something beautiful out of it, and I'm just like, I never. There's no way. My brain just doesn't work that way, and it's.
My husband's
so
the same
cool.
way, because he'll be like working on the house, doing some house project, and he's really creative with that. But I'll be like, making weird things in the garage, and he'll be like, "How did you come up with that?" And I'm like, "Well, you just see the world logically, and I don't." That's why.
Yeah, like the same creativity that made that really nice dish rack.
Yeah.
That's what made this flower. You just focused it in a different place.
Right, exactly. He focuses, like, that's probably what you do. You focus on the logic. Like, I'm going to make this really very functional, and this is how I'm going to make it work. But, it's a creative thing as well. It's just a different way of using that.
Absolutely.
That muscle. Yeah.
Well, and it's so great that you shared that 5% of your proceeds are going to help trauma survivors and help people kind of hop into that next stage of life where, like you said, it's never really, I mean, maybe behind you is the wrong word, but like you're building the new path to take. Right. Even if every now and again something triggers you and you end up on an old rut, there's at least the new route to take and maybe a new pattern or thought process or something like that.
I think being like a survivor of things like that, like, you know, I've had treatment, and the people that I meet in treatment are some of the best people I've ever met in the world. Like, it's always the best of us. I'm like, why is that? And I think part of it is because you have those experiences. It gives you the compassion. It lets you see the rest of the world. It lets you see through other people's eyes. And that's such a great and empowering thing. It's not something that you should ever be ashamed of. Like, that's something that you should take power from. Yeah. And empower others with. And that's really why I came up with the flowers and so forth, because it's a symbol. It's something that's growing and that's alive. If you look at them, they're not stagnant at all. Like, I hand paint them with pipettes, which is kind of crazy. So I'm using like in science class, these plastic little pipettes, which are such a pain, and I'll get color everywhere, but I don't mind that because that's just who I am. But like, I'm trying to make it look alive and that it has some sort of spirit or soul to it, because I think it does. I really believe like that's what makes it more beautiful, is that, those scars and things in it, Yeah. So, that's the aesthetic that I go for, because I could make it look perfect. But who's perfect? Yes. Yeah, no. Yeah, I could throw that in a mold in 2 seconds, and you could have an exact replica of a rose that you bought off of the street. But that just doesn't speak to me. I don't think that speaks to people.
It certainly doesn't speak to your message.
No.
And that's I think, a big part of, at least what it seems like, what it appears to be. You have such a strong message of empowering people to see the beauty in their scars and see the beauty in kind of their own journey, regardless of what it looks like.
Right.
Even if there's some like hard points or some sad points or some shame points, that all of that still equals something that's beautiful at the end.
Yes.
And I certainly think that what you're doing with the flowers and the fact that you are so committed to creating something that's beautiful in a way that reminds people that they themselves have that same attractive quality of not being perfect but being wonderful at the same time.
Right.
It's awesome. It really is.
Yeah, because it's not, I don't know, I make these vases too, like out of like shattered mirrors. It's not the perfect vase. That's just the persona that so many of us like to put out there. None of us are. It's the shattered part that we put back together. That's what makes life interesting, makes life beautiful. So a lot of my work has something to do with that. It's like taking something that's shattered and making it into something beautiful. Because a lot of people will describe going through trauma or having PTSD as like, it's like an experience that shatters your brain in the way you see things, and you can't really go back. You can't undo like living through 9/11. You can't undo being in a war experience. You can't undo so many of those things. So instead of having that persona of the perfect vase, just let it go and be who you are. Be the beauty of who you are, and it's already there. Just let it shine,
Yeah, I think authenticity is one of the most attractive qualities. Just period. Like, whether it's, I feel like that's one of my favorite things about old classic cars, where like I see it and I'm like, this is I love cars from the 80s, which are notoriously terrible.
Right.
Like everything about the 80s, nothing about the 80s was like about quality. But every time I see it, I'm like, that is what happens when someone refuses to bend on any of their principles.
Right.
They just want to...
They don't even bend metal.
Exactly.
Straight metal.
Yeah.
It's just
And
straight.
I think that that's the same with human beings is authenticity is far more... Like, I feel like, going back to Banksy, that's what makes Banksy so incredibly attractive. Like, I've heard one story about him, and now I'm like, Banksy fan for life. OG, right? Like, and it's because of the authenticity there, and you've spoken about being a trauma survivor. What were some of the things that you kind of, I guess, helped propel you to this new point of view? Because I'm sure it's you always had this viewpoint of like, what I've gone through has made me beautiful, or has made my story beautiful, or has made me stronger, better. All of the empowering ways that you can choose to see that.
Right.
Or was that something of a journey that you kind of had to go through?
It was definitely a journey. Like, I would make work about like the trauma and stuff that I experienced, as an adult, as a kid. Not really knowing it. Like, I would make it and I knew that it was there, but I didn't know why I was really making it. How does this fit in? And then it's taken years of work to get to the point of now being able to express it. Oh, like, this is because of my trauma, but it's not something that I'm shamed or hiding away from. I'm trying to show it now. Because I think it took a long time for me to even accept everything that happened to me, and took years of work in therapy to be able to accept it and then to make it into something positive, not something that I was ashamed about, and turn it into something positive that I could give back to the world. So instead of me teaching, which I really loved, the way I feel like I give back is by like doing things like this, talking about like trauma, and how I got through it, and like having the flowers and the business, just being like kind of like a role model. I don't know, for lack of a better word.
Yeah,
like,
my dad's always said that you're always a role model. You are constantly an example. It is up to you whether or not you are an example of what to do or not to do.
Right.
Someone is watching. Someone is learning.
Right. Exactly. And that's what I want to be. So I don't. A lot of people call themselves survivors, or there's so much jargon with that term. I call myself like an art victorette. Like, I'm an artist. I'm an activist about ending the cycle of trauma, and then I am victorious over it. Like Hunger Games, right? Those people, they call themselves victors, and that's because they survived the Hunger Games, right? Like, I survived all of that trauma, and I'm here, so I should celebrate that. So I call myself an art victorette. So it's kind of got all of those in there, because that's who I am. And it's taken a long time to accept, like, this is who I am. Oh, but it feels really good to just be like, oh, this is me. Okay, so you can take it or leave it.
Going back to that authenticity, like, I really think there's nothing that's just more freeing for the human spirit, also more attractive to the human spirit than just actual authenticity, especially in a time where authenticity is so easy to manufacture. We talked about it on our last podcast of how, especially with social media, it is really easy to kind of accidentally manufacture an identity without even meaning to, and then all of a sudden realizing, like, I don't actually think I have anything in common with this person. Or, like, maybe I have some things in common, but that's certainly not who I am. And I would actually be bummed if that's who someone thought I was.
Right.
Kind of a thing.
Right. Like getting stuck into, like, a persona that you were in high school, and you're not even that person, or middle school even, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they talk about that a lot. Like, kids get stuck into that persona, and then they can't even change, which is so bizarre, right?
Yeah, and I think such a big part of it is leaning into flaws.
Right.
Is what helps someone get past them.
Right.
Like, I was a really bizarre, weird kid, and it made it very difficult to have friends growing up.
Right.
And there were like, I literally remember one day just realizing, like, having the epiphany of, like, no one wants to hang out with me because I'm weird. I've got it now.
You're right.
And you're, like, realizing it was on me. Like, no, they're not out of the wrong here. I'm being super weird. And then kind of the next question of, like, well, what am I going to do about it? And then I was like, I'm going to actually choose.
To be weird.
For the first time, I'm actually going to choose, like, what I want to do instead of just reacting to what's around me. I'm actually going to choose, like, this is who I'm committed to being. Mm-hmm. And then it stopped being upsetting when I was being weird or people were like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm doing me. Like, don't worry about it. If it's not for you, it's not supposed to be.
And then just, just keep going because I'm going to be in here.
Yeah, like I want you to equally do you as much as, and we aren't supposed to necessarily, like, interact. Like, that's fine. I'm here doing me, and, like, if that's not supposed to mesh well with what you're supposed to be doing, I'm not going to hold that against either of us.
Well, and then I feel like you almost use being weird in a negative context. Like, because you were
that is fair
like
point.
Maybe socially awkward in a way that you didn't want to be, so you noticed and changed, as did me less so, but
I think you've come
but
much
because we're
farther.
both still weird. I think weird
that's
isn't
true.
bad.
Weird's
like,
the wrong word.
I'm proud to be weird and different and all this. I would rather not be socially awkward, and I want to have friends and do that.
Yeah, that's a valid point.
Yeah.
I mean,
Weird might be the wrong word, but I do remember having that moment of
but
no one wants to be around me because of me and how I'm choosing to hold myself. And then once I really figured out, or maybe not figured out, but chose who I wanted to be, within literally months, I remember the difference between 8th grade and halfway through freshman year.
Right.
Not even halfway through. I had already made, like, a group of friends. They were all BMX riders. And that was really important to me that, like, I wanted to hang out with more BMX riders.
Right.
And I had gone from, like, this weird environment where I didn't really feel home to all of a sudden having this insanely tight-knit group of people around me. And I was never performing.
Right.
In the sense that I wasn't performing to be someone I wasn't.
Right.
I was performing because I'm a show pony and I enjoy performing.
Right.
And I love the spotlight, but it was never because I was trying to be anything other than myself.
Right.
And I feel like that's a big, or at least it sounds like that's a big part of kind of your message of being a victorette of trauma is owning that you experienced it. And how wonderful is it that I'm here now?
Right.
Or that I experienced it and now I'm going to get through it.
Well,
or I want to help others.
people.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. And that's what I think that's so important that I think a lot of people lose today is, it's when you accept that, that's when you attract more people that are like you to you, and then you're not alone anymore with it. Whatever it is, I felt like that as a kid too, like in school and finding my thing. I was always super shy, and then I eventually, I got into music, and that helped me make friends, and then I changed again into art. Because I am an artist, I had to rebel. Rebelling from the art.
Mom, I'm not painting, I'm doing music now.
Exactly. But then, once I accepted, that's who I was, then it just fit so much better, and my art friends just totally get me, and they're like, oh, yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, of course you want to make that. Of course you're painting your whole studio black so you can do an install. To anyone else, that would look completely insane, but I'm like, no, I need a completely dark room so you can't see anything. Works. Yeah, exactly. So when you find the place that you're meant to be, it just all starts clicking. And I think that's so important because there's such an emphasis today on, I don't know, just this fake Kardashian perfect, not even a perfect world, but putting on this perfect persona of there's nothing wrong, nothing goes wrong, everything's fine. This is my fake view, fake persona that I give out to the world. But I don't think that really reaches people.
I think oftentimes it's not even a fake persona. I think it's just not a complete persona.
Right.
Like I honestly think when someone just sees the perfect, I want people to know how awesome I'm doing because I'm enjoying myself. I'm always going to want to showcase my best and have my best foot forward. I don't think that's wrong by any stretch of the imagination, but it's pretending like that's the only thing that's going on. Right. I think is where the danger lies of being able to say like, I'm on purpose showing you the best, but know that this isn't the only.
Right.
It's just not a complete view.
Well, and I do think this is going to be a fad. Like, when we were kids, it was a lot more. I mean, you're in it, so you don't realize it's a fad of like buying Power Rangers toys. And my dad was like, "Don't do this. Don't spend your money on Power Rangers toys." But we loved it, and then a year later, it's gone. And this fad is lasting longer than the 1 year Power Ranger fad or the Tamagotchi fad.
Yeah. Shout out to Tamagotchi.
Pogs. Yes.
But there's no way. It's just not possible for this perfect life type thing to last forever. Like it's going to crash and change, and I don't know what's next. I wish I did, but
I don't. I love not knowing.
I know. Yes, he loves surprises. So you don't know, but he was surprised with his wedding. So he loves surprises.
I love
not knowing he was getting married until 5 hours before he got married.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Oh my God, that was so much easier.
It was so easy.
For him, for us, it was massive. And his wife, it was almost the death of her. But
but she still smashed it out in like 7 weeks.
Wow.
But, that's
stressful 7 weeks of her life.
But that's a valid point, though, that
every wedding is.
I feel like that's a pretty valid point, though, Dylan, of everything's kind of a cycle. Like bell bottoms are back now. Like everything kind of has a fad.
Bell bottoms were back.
I've heard it from multiple sources. I've seen it from multiple people.
There is no way.
Yeah, I'm not into it, but I'm rarely into popular culture. But I think that what you're saying of it is a fad. I think it just because of all the stuff I've done with Allison Armstrong, I recognize why it appeals to the human instinct. Not the best of what makes us human, but the parts of us that makes it easy to survive and all that stuff, like the really truly instinct stuff we don't control.
Right.
Pretending like it's possible for protection or for perfection is a form of perfection, right? Like, if it's possible to be perfect, I should I feel like it changes kind of our own rules when we see ourselves like, technically it's an option for me to be perfect, or like look at what it takes to be perfect instead of saying like, well, no one's perfect. So instead of seeing someone like that's on the silver screen or someone who's large and famous, instead of choosing to see them as like, wow, they're perfect, that's what I need to strive for, instead of saying like, look at what seems to be perfect, I promise you, like the other day she stubbed her toe getting out of bed, or they accidentally turned their car on while it was already on, or like all this silly things that make people humans. I think you have a really good point of it's just a fad, and I don't think it appeals to the best of what makes people human, and it's just not going to last.
Yeah, I hope not. Like, because I think there's like a lot of bad things. Like Michael Jackson, right? Yeah. Everybody looked at him as perfect, and now they have the new documentary out, and the sheen is coming off. There's a lot of trauma in that family's background, and a lot of cycle of trauma going on there, and that's the truth of what was going on. But imagine like how things would be different for all of them if they had ever accepted that happened and gotten help. Yeah, they might be alive today,
Who knows?
And not cause like trauma forward.
It doesn't perpetuate it.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that's the biggest thing is like we're so afraid to talk about those imperfections and those scary stuff. And then, and trauma usually if there's trauma in a family, it started, hundreds and hundreds of years back, and you can kind of trace it back. Mm-hmm. So unless you start talking about it and like solving it, then it's never going to go away. Yeah. And it's really important to start having these conversations. Like, yeah, you can get past it and you can, change the world in that way.
Yeah, I think, so one of my favorite authors of all time, Brene Brown, has some amazing, amazing books on kind of her whole career has turned out to be like
trauma,
but more specifically like what shame does to the human spirit. And like how horrible it is for us.
Right.
And my favorite quote is, shame only exists in a vacuum. It cannot exist out of silence. Right. Mm-hmm. So even something as simple as talking about it can break all kinds of habits and thought patterns and cycles. Literally as simple as like, Allie, my wife and I have a very explicit rule of like, no inner thoughts are allowed to stay inner thoughts. If it's an amazing thought and you're really proud of yourself, I want you to share it so I can talk about it. If even more importantly, if it's one of those inner thoughts where you're like, oh, I ate that cookie and I said I wasn't going to eat any sugar until Saturday. I want to know about that thought even more importantly so that you don't think you're a piece of garbage for eating that cookie. Like, literally, as soon as you just share it and it becomes out in the open, not all of it, but like the shame goes away. The guilt is still, you did what you said you weren't going to do, but you're no longer thinking of yourself as a terrible person for it. You're like, well, now I just need to get past it. And I think that's from at least an outside perspective looking in, a big part of getting past trauma is saying like, it happened, now what are we going to do about it?
Right.
Instead of it happened, now I need to be ashamed that it happened, or I need to be stuck in this own negative place.
Right. And it's a growth process for sure. Like, it takes time. Like, I think in a way when you live through trauma and things like that, you have to mourn it and you have to let yourself feel everything about it. Usually I think most people get stuck is like they just deny that it's ever there and then just shut it away and put it away and then never want to open that box ever again. But it raises its ugly head in different ways, like for me, like some people, maybe they'll turn to alcohol or drugs. For me, I became a workaholic, aka 3 degrees. Like I have a 4.0 in both of my master's programs. Who does that? Like, who gets 2 masters anyway? But on top of that, like, it's 4.0s. Like,
I just
yes, exactly. But well, it wasn't like bragging. It's more of like I was working myself to death, so I didn't have to feel anything.
Yes, you didn't have to address the elephant in the room.
Yeah, I didn't have to address the elephant, but it made me feel better too, right? Because I was having all of those feelings of shame, but I couldn't really process them. Like I didn't have the help there to process them, and I wasn't ready yet. So it takes time to get there for sure. So that's kind of like my message to people. It's okay to have those feelings. It takes time, and it's okay to be where you are in your path because it's your path and it's made for you to learn what you need to learn in your life.
And so do you feel like you've replaced the trauma with joy at all? As the Joy Quota podcast.
Yes.
Tell us about some joy.
Yeah, so like every day every day I'm taking care of a baby.
Right. Now that's become your joy. The last 9 weeks, that is your joy for sure.
But yeah, and I never thought I would ever have kids or be in a happy marriage or have a house. So I have all of those joys now, but like the joy of being in my studio, of just being in there and dancing around and making my artwork. It's so much fun, and I'm just happy. And in my garage, so it's like right there. So I don't ever have to like leave it. You know, I can go anytime I want and make something beautiful, and it just feels really good. I don't know, like it's an addiction. I always, like my art friends, we always talk about it's an addiction, the arts, you know, like you're getting that zone and you find that Zen place and you're just addicted to finding that Zen place. So you keep doing it until you get there. So yeah, and it's always right there. So I can always just find that Zen spot. Me covered in... shards of metal, paint all over my hands, and yeah, I'm a happy little camper out in my studio. My husband and I fight. We're like, okay, if we move and downsize, I'm like, well, we can kind of downsize. I'm like, we'll need like a 4-car garage, but we could just live in one room, just
we'll have like one room above the garage.
Exactly. A 1-room apartment. That's cool. Do the whole IKEA thing and, have both be in our garage areas.
That's a perfect example, though, of a joy quota decision, right? Like, we've talked about it many times on the podcast of how all I want is like a giant compound where me and many of my friends all live on essentially the same property with our own houses and all the wonderful things that we enjoy doing, from racing cars to pools to dirt jumps to a skate park to everything we could ever want in this one little place. And I genuinely would live in a very small house, like a kitchenette. But as long as I had the rest of the things to make sure that the joy quota's totally taken care of, I'm not that concerned with the rest of it. And that's kind of what it sounds like with the studio is like, learn. And I applaud taking that serious and really defending it. I think so many people end up not protecting that space. They've once found a place, or maybe they've never taken the time to learn about themselves to find out where that Zen place is for them. Or that joyful place, that happy place is. And they either don't protect it or they don't protect the time set aside to find it. And that to me is like the biggest tragedy.
Or like I think a lot of people too, like, oh, you have all these responsibilities and, oh, I have kids, now I have a kid and I have to work crappy job. I have to do telemarketing job or X job and I hate doing it, and it's to pay for my everyday living expenses and take care of my family. Okay, yes, we all have to bite it once in a while, but you really have to fight for what you really love and what you want to do, and just not give up and protect that. And that's what I found for myself is like, starting a new business is hard, and it's like trying to make money from it and having a family and having a house and having a mortgage. Like I get what people say, but at the same time, every time I've tried to work like a normal job, it just doesn't work out very well for me. Like I ended up here for a reason, and now it's my time to fight to protect that. And it's such a wonderful place. One of my friends was saying, the studio is such a wonderful, magical place. And like artists, we look at the outside world and we don't understand how normal people don't have a studio. Like, think about it. There's actually giraffes and elephants in the world. They're out there, and there's these huge, wonderful beasts. They're out there, and they're super magical, and they're just right there. Like, that's crazy.
You're speaking right to me.
I know.
I could talk for hours about how I'm constantly amazed by everything.
Right. But for us, we have, like, a giraffe and elephant in our studio. We go out there and make magic every day. And it's so sad, like, that other people don't have it. Like, it doesn't make sense to, like...
Yeah, and maybe not that they don't have it, but like we've been saying, like I think it's so important to really protect what it is that brings the joy, brings you to that Zen place. I know, like a big part of last year, I wasn't able to ride my BMX bike for the first time since I was like, it was probably the longest time I've gone without riding since I was 13. So like a full decade of nonstop riding, and then for 1 year I basically didn't get to ride because of injuries and just being focused on some other things. And when Allie and I were going through the year at the end and kind of just reflecting and all that, the first thing she said is she's like, I want you to get back on your bike. I want you to ride as much as possible this year because you're better for it. And it's totally true. I went and rode my bike after our last podcast with Connor, literally just around a parking lot because I was like, I'm just so jazzed on being able to ride a bike because I bunny hopped his in the parking lot. And it's been months since I got to ride.
Right.
And it was amazing. And do you feel, so I say all that to bring us to, do you think that protecting that Zen space, aka for you, the studio, for me, that quality time with my two wheels underneath my feet, do you think that makes you more effective as a mom or as a business owner or as a wife or as a neighbor, as just a person contributing to society?
Yeah.
Do you think that actually enhances you, even if on the surface it might seem kind of counterintuitive? Like, oh, I'm taking away from the budget or I'm taking away from my time or whatever that might look like.
I think it's like a constant lesson to the members of my family. Like I talked to my husband about it because he wants to be a pilot and he's working towards that. And I'm like, you have to just keep fighting for that because it's really hard to get in there. Like it's almost the same thing. Like you have to get so much training and it's super expensive. It's like $150 an hour and it's 1,500 hours. And I'm like, you just have to do it. It's who you are. And I have to do this. And how do we want to raise our kid? Do we want to raise our son to not dream? Yeah. And I'm like, I don't want him to learn that. I want him to dream and to get to do what he wants to do with his life. And I'd rather teach him that than how to be stable and miserable for the rest of his life because you only get one life.
Yes.
And there's so little time when you really look at it at all. Like even like doing this class and, having baby, like he's already 9 weeks. Like how did that happen?
Yeah.
One
of the best things I'd ever heard, one of my friends, Sarah, is hands down the most intensely passionate person I've ever met. And she's in a season right now where she is just on fire. I've never seen her like this, and I'm so happy for her. And we have like a monthly call that a bunch of us get on, and she was talking about finding that passion, finding something worth protecting, and finding something worth pursuing. And she brought up a really wonderful point of make sure it's something that even if it didn't work out, it would have been worth doing. Like, even if your husband never became a pilot, it would have been worth all of the money and all of the effort and all of the hours and all the time he got to spend up there cruising the skies. If we end up just doing a podcast with our friends till I'm 80, I'm not going to be upset. If we end up if I end up sharing with one kid the idea of Joy Quota, and then as an adult they take one little step to make sure that they protect that little bit of themselves that will make sure that they get their tanks filled, worth it. No matter, like, if at the end of the day, monetarily, this turns into nothing and it's literally an expense, never even makes it into the green, worth it. That's not at all what I want, but it would absolutely be worth it. And I think that, to me, is kind of what sums that feeling of like, it's just worth it.
It is.
If that's what you want to pursue, you have to pursue it.
Oh, yeah.
And if it's in your bones, you have to. And there's no reason to think that you can't get good enough at it to get paid for it or to make it a full-time income, whatever your passion is. But if you're passionate about it, it's just worth doing.
Well, and that's what I think is great about Bobbianne, as far as, like, she knows she is an artist. Like, that's just what she has to do. But she also knows, like, I have to do something. And so she's in this business course to put together a business plan of how she's going to make money.
Yep.
Right.
And I'm excited for her to do that.
Yeah, no, I am too, because it's like the more I go through it and everything, it's like, nope, I'm not going to worry about trying to find doing a side hustle on top of this. I think raising a kid and starting a business might be just enough.
It sounds full time.
Yeah, it sounds full time. I think maybe that's all I can handle right now, and that's okay. But maybe that's what I'm supposed to do, and like taking the risks to be the most happy, joyous person that I can be. And, I don't know, I was talking to somebody about it. If it's worth the risk, if I could help one person find some joy, like see the work that I do and find some joy, isn't that worth it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially if they've gone through like some horrible traumatic stuff. Isn't that worth it? Yes, it is. And I can't stop because of that one person out there that it could help.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like why I do it. Because that's part of healing, right? Like you it's not just healing you, it's healing the others around you and trying to help others. That gives you and heals them too. So, yeah.
Yeah, a big part of healing is sharing and contributing once you've gotten to that place.
Right.
I've made it past. Like, I love talking to kids where I can see, like, you are absolutely golden and you are in your own way. Mm-hmm. Those are my favorite kids to talk to where I'm like, I know what... Here's the deal. Mm-hmm. I've been in your shoes. Learn from my own pain where I can say... Right. Maybe you could make it easier to approach you, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's nothing wrong with being a little more friendly or whatever the case might be for the individual, but that's such a big part of, I find a tremendous amount of healing because that's really like if I had to say there was any part of my life that really was traumatic, was going through this intense phase where I really felt outside and on my own and kind of isolated. And loneliness is such an intense feeling for the human heart where it took me a long time to get past just how lonely I felt all the way through 8th grade.
Yeah.
Kindergarten through 8th grade, I really was kind of on my own and I kind of felt alone and realizing that I was in my own way and I healed from that through high school and then I turned into an adult and immediately was like, now that I'm kind of on the other side of that, what would make me heal or feel that healing the most is getting to help someone else go through that same process.
Yeah.
So that being said, tell us a little bit more about the flowers and some of the work that you're doing with that. Have you gotten to sell any of your pieces yet?
I have. I've just done some craft fairs, and those have been okay. Craft fairs are such a weird beast because you have people that are like selling like sunglasses or CBD oil at some, and then others it's like, it's like $1,000 to get in, and then if it rains, then nobody comes.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm kind of changing my whole business plan from doing that. People love them, and they've sold, so I'm really happy about that. But it's more of like I need to find my niche, like find my actual people and be going to like events and stuff for survivors or having them in like a retail store of like, oh, you're going here to buy stuff to decorate your house. Hey, buy a bunch of flowers or,
I wonder if you could do something with like a ward of a treatment center or a hospital or something like how cool would that be as like a way to do installation art,
right?
Especially something that's so specifically focused on that is get to go to like children's and you're working with these kids who are going through the trauma of having like leukemia or like being told as like a small kid like you probably aren't going to make it or like something that would be really kind of hard to go through. I feel like that is something even as I'm saying it, that's the kind of stuff that I think as a society we could get behind is as far as like installation art or just something with such a wonderful cause behind it, like you have of trying to help people move past their own experiences. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm.
For the next hour, so I'm not going to. I'm going to resist the temptation.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like even like having them like in a like hospital gift shop and things like that, and maybe even doing like shows and stuff. Like like if I'm making like these big fountains and stuff, like hey, you can come and buy, come see the fountains and pick one for your yard or whatever. So that's kind of like the next plan. So I started in increments, making the flowers. Now I'm starting to make the fountains and the bigger work. So I wanted to try, I don't know. I just wanted to see if, these would sell.
And totally. Proof of concept is absolutely.
Yeah, so I feel like I've got proof of concept. Now it's just making the bigger work and the more, the more expensive work because it's going to take a crap ton more steel.
And the time. That was something, because I do a lot of woodworking and steel and
that takes a lot of time.
Because of things like that.
Yeah.
There's always a very deceptively enticing, I could make a resin table for $500 and sell it for $2,500. And then doing a few projects and things like that where you quickly realize, it might sell for $2,500, but you also have 80 hours wrapped up into that. I made some coasters with Allie and she wood burned them and they turned out so cool.
Right.
And I spent all this extra time polishing these things.
God,
they couldn't be nicer. Not literally, but just sanding and sanding and sanding and getting them glass smooth and then all these coats of finish, and then realizing I was 15 hours into a set of coasters that
you would never get more than $30 more, right?
And $30 would be unreasonable to ask for these things. Right. They're beautiful, but at the same time,
for $30 for a set.
So that's always something I feel like with art that's always going to be that battle of I need to make this, but I need to make this in a way that it financially lets me make more of this. Right?
Oh, yeah.
It's not just, I spent 90 hours on that and I sold it for $200.
No, that's the thing, too, is making it economical because it's the flowers and things, I had to figure out a process to make that work, right? So I kind of just stole Henry Ford's thing, okay, so I'm going to make all the petals, and then I'm going to take and weld them, and then I'm going to do the next step, and then I'm going to paint them. Yep, so I do batches. And that's saves a lot more time. And I've worked I'm always reworking the studio, so it's I have a pathway within there. So I have a place where I clean the metal, and then the next place is to cut the metal down, and so I have a plasma cutter. Yeah, so I have literally you can have a little trail that you go through to make the flowers. So that makes it more economical too. So any way that you can save time in your process, that really helps. And having the tools that you need.
Yeah.
Biting the bullet and just buying what you need.
Yeah. Amen to that. Yeah.
It's fun, but bad.
Big deal right there. I mean, I feel like that's something fun. Maybe it's one of the last couple things we could talk about. You guys have both been going through this class and being acutely aware of where Dylan was at before and after the class, which you guys still haven't finished, but just as he's gone through it, how have you or I guess maybe enjoyed's maybe the wrong word. How have you grown from the class? Because I know I've seen Dylan and the vision that he has for his project change dramatically over the course. And I'd love to shout out the class because I really think it's valuable and pretty reasonably affordable for what seems to be a tremendous amount of value. Just from the one person I've seen go through it, I'd love to hear your experience and maybe just hear about you guys and what your take is.
Well, you want to go first? I don't know. How have you changed? For me, it's just solidified. this is what I'm going to do, that I can get the funding and do whatever it takes to make this work. And it's okay if things aren't like perfect. Like, I don't know. I always thought I was doing something wrong. Like, all these lenders are looking at my credit. Why are they looking at my credit? Because the business has no credit. And like, how does I get the business credit? Oh, that's just how it works. Oh, I'm not doing something wrong. That's just how it works. It's not that I'm not professional enough or anything. That's just the process. You build up the credit for the business. You kind of have to take whatever loan you can get, and then you refinance it. And yeah. So it's like solidified to me that it's like I can do this, and it's okay, and just do it. Because I think you, some like my in-laws are not necessarily that supportive. They just don't get it. They're baby boomers, and baby boomers just don't understand us millennials. They just don't. We confuse them, to be honest. But like, because they're like, you should just get a job. You could be a professor. You have a baby. Just be a professor and work for 30 years and retire from there. And I'm like, that doesn't even work anymore. I can't even retire from being a professor. The schools keep breaking. When did that happen?
You tried it a couple times, and the schools went out of business.
Exactly. I'm like, when did that happen for boomers? When did a college go bankrupt?
Yeah, exactly. They're just operating under a very different set of rules.
I know.
They're just playing a different game. You wouldn't ask a basketball player to play football using basketball rules.
Right.
You have to play by the rules of the game, and the game's just changed.
Right. And you don't, like, you work, 5 different careers by the time you retire? That's just the new norm?
I've heard something like that.
I've heard it's 5 careers in the first 10 years out of school.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then there was, then they're like, oh, you spent so much on
maybe
your
not 5 different careers, but 5 different jobs. Or
yes,
employers,
exactly.
for sure.
Yeah, and then it's like, oh, you have to spend so much more on education. They're like, oh, why do you have to take on this debt? And like, because college for you guys, I used to look at transcripts.
It wasn't as for-profit.
Yeah, no, it was. One guy, he has a doctorate, and I was looking, I'm like, you spent $2,000 getting your doctorate. I'm like, what? Like, he spent $70 a class. A class.
Yeah,
that's not here. That doesn't happen now. Like, it's $70 for what? The fee to join?
Application fee?
The application fee for the college.
Right, you're not even getting a book for $70.
I know, exactly.
Maybe a used one.
But maybe. But it's different now. And so, you have to, I feel like you have to take the risk now. And it's not really that much of a risk to actually get paid what you deserve.
It's a calculated risk.
It's a calculated risk. But if I was a professor, I wouldn't be raising my son. I would be working 60, 70 hours a week. You have to teach and make your lessons and all of that. Plus, you have to have a show for your students during the year for them. And you have to have at least 2 shows because you don't write papers and get published. The way you publish is by showing your work.
Yeah.
And so I would have to be making work. I was working 60, 70 hours a week. You don't raise a kid that way. A babysitter does.
Yeah, I think just the values or what's important has also shifted as a part of the rules of the game changing quite dramatically, where I've at least even just talking to my parents, what they valued was far different than what me and Dylan and all of our friends value, where it's I'll take less pay for more vacation.
Yeah.
Right? That's just, that was never something that they would have taken.
Right.
Or just my quality of life is better, so I'll make a compromise here so I can have more quality of life.
And that might be one thing that is this product of the social media, perfect appeal, whatever you want to say, of you get to see so many more places. Just by, you go on Instagram and you see Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, and you're like, I need to go there.
Right.
And that is one thing that is good, because people do need to be going to these places and be inspired to go explore and do this. And maybe there's many benefits, but that is one benefit.
Yeah. The world's become a smaller place in terms of what you think is possible.
Right, because when our parents were growing up, they probably wouldn't see these places as much. Like, how do you?
They probably wouldn't have even thought to see it.
Right. Like, you go into an encyclopedia or an atlas.
And you read about
it. Who's doing that? Nobody.
Versus you see some cool sandy beach on Instagram and you're like, well, within 15 seconds, I'll Google flights of what it takes to actually get there. And 20 minutes later, you're like, I could technically make a plan to get to such and such location.
Well, yeah. I mean, I even did it. Like, I Googled flights to Colombia, and it was $300. I'm like, I can't even afford not to go at that price.
Yeah, right.
It's economically irresponsible for me to not
go. Exactly. No, I think that's so true and so important. Like why work at a job for 30 years and be unhappy with it? I don't know. I don't know. My dad taught at the same high school from the time I was born until I was 35, and then he retired, and he, I don't know if he even feels joy about, like, he was just done. Like, something snapped, and he was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, and my mom ended up teaching too, and she, like, her students were just, like, she caught 2 of her students having sex in her classroom, and she was like, I'm done. I'm retiring.
Wow.
I'm good. I'm done.
Like in the middle of class?
Like they had snuck off to the studio, like one of the other studio rooms teaching art. Yeah, she's like, I'm done. I'm like, yeah, I would be too.
Yeah, I can understand.
Yeah, time to retire. Like, that doesn't bring joy. Like, to look back and this is what you have. I would like to look back and say, hey, I had this business and I tried this, and I raised my kid, not somebody else, not a babysitter, and I was there for him and not working myself to death. Like,
yeah, and you showed him what it looked like to really chase what makes you feel alive.
Right.
I think that's the ultimate gift. Like, even if, like I said, it was worth it. Even if at the end of the day, your art didn't make it to exactly where you wanted it to, but as a result of watching you chase your dream, your son, Asher grows up and he takes his passions seriously from a young age, and as a result becomes incredibly good at what he's passionate about. And if you become incredibly good at anything, there's a way to get paid for it. And all of a sudden he is out there just absolutely living his best life as a result of watching someone, aka you, really chase what makes you passionate first.
Yeah.
Totally worth it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I've gained from this class is just the will to just fight and keep doing it, that there's,
belief, I think, is the most priceless commodity.
Yeah.
That's what I'm not going to speak into Dylan's life, but that's really what I've seen out of Dylan is something that was kind of abstract and a good idea and something that he wanted has become something that he's far more committed to, and something that there's belief that it'll work rather than like, it'd be nice if that worked. Just from what I've seen out of the last
because
weeks of you being
have
in the class.
to, put stuff together to prove that it will work. Otherwise, nobody cares.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But in the process, you've tricked yourself into thinking it'll work.
That's true. I mean...
Well, it's like we've gotten the tools too, right? Like we got Ibis World and like all these marketing people that came in, and all the funding people that have come in and talked to us. Like we've gotten the tools now to actually have the resources to figure it out. Like I think for me, like that's part of what I was missing. Like I had started and I figured out a product and all of that, but I was missing some of these other tools that I needed. And I knew it because it was like, I'm not getting to my people. Like, I don't know where my market is, but it's not this niche at this craft fair where there, there's like 50 grandmas that are, they're wanting to buy their crocheted, sweater for their grandkid for $5. Like that's not where I belong. That's not the kind of artwork that I do. It's
and
not
it's not
a craft.
on message.
Right. Exactly.
It might maybe reach who you're trying to. But
it's like I could get one.
You're not going to sell a death metal T-shirt at like a Beyonce concert. It just wouldn't make sense.
Right.
The headliner always matches the style of who they're supporting. So well, thank you so much for joining us. We like to. I feel like we've covered a lot of really wonderful topics, and it's kind of been all over and amazing conversation and really deep.
About.
It feels good.
We love to end by, and you've briefly touched on it, we like to always ask the question at the end, just because sometimes it kind of goes to a deep place.
Right.
It's just like a nice, you got to stretch after the workout. That's where the real injuries happen. But this is our stretch after the workout of what, when you think of the word joy, what comes to mind? Like, what's like the first thing? A lot of times it's something small. It doesn't have to be a good piece of story. This is just for you.
Really, it's kind of just like being at home.
Yeah.
Right? Like surrounded by like my family, like my husband and my son and our dogs, which are like pretty much have been our kids for the last 10 years until we had Asher. Like just hanging out with them, and then like the studio. Those are like the images that popped into my head when you said that. Like that's where I feel peace and safe and secure, is when I'm doing my art and hanging out with them. I'm pretty happy. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Bobbianne. This has been really wonderful, and can't wait for everyone to go check out your artwork because it is unbelievable. Link below to her awesome website, and please support such a talented person.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, support so we can help other people.
Amen.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Sweet.